Welcome to Zen Leader, where we empower women to tap into their confidence, discover their voice, and find calm in the chaos. Join your host, Dr. Jody Blinko, founder of Zen Leader, motivational speaker, self-help coach, and author of Inner Alchemy, as we have unfiltered and unscripted conversations with inspiring women from around the globe. Here's your host, Dr. Jody Blinko.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Zen Leader podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Jody Blinko, founder of Zen Leader, and very excited to have our guest on today. She's got quite the journey. I will let her give you a little bit of an overview here in a minute, but Laura Moreno joins us. Laura and I connected several years ago, and it's so funny how paths just recross, and you never, I don't know, I'm a believer that maybe you never say goodbye to people. They just kind of resurface at different stages of your life sometimes, at least those that you're meant to be connected with in some way or another. So Laura, welcome to the Zen Leader podcast. Your story, I think, is going to resonate with so many and be inspirational to so many. And I'll stop over talking and I'm going to let you share a little bit of an overview, and then we'll get into some questions. But tell us more about you, Laura, and just your journey of the corporate world to now yoga teacher.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Jody. I am so excited to get to chat with you, and really, to your point, to get to reconnect. And it's so funny how we come back into each other's lives in the most timely moments. I always say it's divine timing.
Yeah.
So my journey has been very all over the place, I think, but really, when you stand back and look at it, you're like, oh, this kind of makes sense.
Yeah.
I started in traditional higher ed, working in admissions, and was there for many, many years and loved it. Loved working with the students. I just have a love of learning and continuing education in general. And after being in it for a few years, I started feeling like, as much as I loved it, I wanted to do more, and in a little bit different way. I wanted to innovate and kind of be more on the front cutting edge of what education looked like and how things were changing, and really how we were offering education to students. And that was around the time of the pandemic as well, when online was just skyrocketing. And so at that time, I transitioned into working in EdTech, so education technology. And at the time, it was everything. It was exactly what I wanted to be. It was so fast paced. I felt like I was learning so much. I remember the job that I took, my boss, before he hired me, he was like, this is going to be a very steep learning curve, because we really are doing things in a completely new way. And at that time, that was exactly what I wanted. And I got that. And I was in it for nearly 3 years in ed tech. And throughout that time, a lot of things changed. The industry changed. A lot of the regulatory laws in the US changed around how different ed techs could operate. And that ended up affecting my company quite a bit. And in turn, that affected my job and my role. And at the beginning, it was really exciting because I was getting to step into new responsibilities and getting to learn a lot of new things. And then it ended up changing in a way that I wasn't as excited about. And that ended up happening at the exact same time that I had done a 200-hour yoga teacher training. And when I started that teacher training, I had no interest in teaching. It was just something for me. I was like, this is what I always loved. I grew up with it. My parents are like very hippie, very yoga, very tai chi.
I love it. Yes.
So I grew up with all of that. And I was like, let me actually take a deep dive for myself.
Yeah.
And so I did that training while I was living in Denver. And it was so interesting because it felt like it clicked. Like, you know, when you learn something and technically it's new information, but you're like, yeah, this makes sense for me.
Yeah.
That's exactly how it felt. And I came out of the training, those 200 hours, still not really wanting to teach. I was like, I still kind of feel like I never wanted to step into something just to do it. I was like, I'm not going to start offering teaching unless I really feel like I have something to contribute.
Yeah.
So I took a few months, and then my one of my teachers from that training was offering a Yin Yoga teacher training, and I ended up taking it, and I fell in love. It was just so different from any type of yoga I had ever done. And for those who are not familiar, Yin is very, very slow stretches where you hold it for long periods of time. And basically, what that does is it opens up the fascia and the connective tissue within your body,
Mm-hmm.
which is so important for our health and our longevity and is really meditative because you're holding these poses for long periods of times, and it can get a little bit uncomfortable because your body's
Yeah.
releasing in places that it wouldn't always have the opportunity to release. And I felt like after finishing that training, I was like, oh, I want to offer this. I want to create space for people to be able to slow down, where I can
Mm-hmm.
cultivate a space and really hold the space for people to be able to relax and release in that way.
Yeah.
And so I ended up completing that training and then was starting to give workshops and different classes and things like that. And I got to the point where I remember it so vividly. I had given this like 2 hour yin intensive, and I paired it with a sound bath with one of my good friends who's a musician.
Mm-hmm.
And I came away from that class having given it and having, when you're on and giving a class, you're paying attention, you're holding space for 20 plus people, you're making sure that everyone's physically safe in their bodies, you're making sure that you're cueing, you're making sure that everything's going right. So you're on.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember going home and feeling like over the moon, like a runner's high, like
Yeah.
just my heart felt so full, and I just felt elated to have been
Mm-hmm.
able to offer that in a way that felt so like I knew what I was doing, like it felt authentic to me, and like I was offering
Mm-hmm.
something so precious.
Yes.
And then the next day going into my 9 to 5 and feeling like, this doesn't quite feel the same as that
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was at this point in my life where I had always been so career driven. And so much so that by the time I was 27, I had accomplished everything that I wanted to accomplish by 30. And I remember feeling like, okay, I did all these things, I checked all the boxes, and I feel nothing. I
Gosh, I
feel,
can relate to that. Yes.
yeah. And it was
Yeah.
so heartbreaking. I was like, what the heck is
Yep.
this? And it made me really begin to question those societal narratives that have been put into place, that you kind of have to
Yep.
be going, 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 and you have to be going, going, going in certain paths. And don't get me wrong, it served me really, really well. I was able to accomplish those goals, and I'm really proud of that. And I'm really glad that I did it. And because I did that, I was at this place in my life where I could really pause and take a step back and analyze, do I want to continue down this path?
Mm-hmm.
Because I was in line for the promotion, I was in line for the raises, I was in line for all these things that I had been. If you had told me even a year ago that I
Yep.
was going to be getting those things, I would have been like, amazing.
Yeah.
Yep, I can't wait. And now I was in this place where I was like, I don't want it. I just don't. And I think continuing down that path would feel so inauthentic. And I had come to this place in my life where I just no longer wanted to live in an inauthentic way, even if it was going to be a really non-traditional kind of funky.
Man, Laura, I have so many questions, but I want to connect to what you're saying about the authenticity piece because when you were sharing that experience of I'm teaching this class, I'm doing this workshop, and I just felt authentic. It was like an authentic expression. And now you're having this moment of the promotions are there. Everything I wanted is there. And a year ago, if you would have asked me, I would have been ready and all about it. And now I don't want it because it doesn't feel authentic. Take me deeper there with, so anyone that's listening to this can, I'm sure, connect to doing things that maybe haven't felt well, I got to do this because I have to, or I'm supposed to, or it's the track that society says I have to go down this track. I have to do these things, or I have to go into this job every day because financially I don't have a different means, but I know it's not what I want to do for the rest of my life. Take me to a place where anybody listening to this, like, talk to me more about that, discovering who am I and what do I really want? And I know that's a ginormous question and probably not one that we are going to solve in this conversation, but I love where you went with that. And I feel like that's such a missing piece, especially when we follow the norms that are set for us by society or what we're told,
Mhm.
or we're comparing ourselves to others. I think that's another big one. If you're always in comparison mode, you're not really even sure what authenticity for you even means.
Mhm. I think the way that I learned to identify it was noticing how I felt after the fact, after I would do something. So in my 9 to 5, I was doing these things that I knew how to do. I was capable, I was competent, had all the tools to be able to be successful in this. And I would come out of an 8 or 9 hour day and I would feel so empty. Like I just wanted to crash. I wanted to go lay on the couch and like have some comfort tea or whatever it was that I was going to do to really rest.
Yeah.
I just felt so worn out. And the contrast to that was after going and teaching this workshop where it's the same thing. You're really pouring into it. You're pouring yourself into it, but you're pouring in from a different part of yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And you're pouring, and then stepping away from that and feeling like everyone had poured into me,
Wow.
of like feeling really replenished and really, yes, I did a thing and it was a lot of effort. And I come away from it feeling like I would have done that for free. Like
Yeah.
I would have done that. I would give this away by the handful, by the armful if I could.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
And so the connecting to how you feel, and we're
Mhm.
using the analogy of the 9 to 5 versus the yoga workshop,
Yeah.
but I think there's so many parallels that somebody could draw from what you said of how do you feel when you interact with certain relationships in your life, with certain activities? Do you walk
Mhm.
away feeling drained? Do you walk away feeling full, recharged, like you received back as much as you were giving?
Yeah.
Um, and especially around the holidays, you often hear people talk about, well, I have to, or I'm
Yeah.
supposed to.
Yeah.
I feel like you talked about the narratives, um, societal norm narratives that I think get imposed on us, but then also these narratives in our own mind of, well, I should, or I'll feel guilty if, or I
Mhm.
have
Mhm.
to.
Mhm.
And I love your recommendation of pay attention to how you feel
Yeah.
when you're leaving work after your interaction with this person, these relationships, these hobbies. That feeling tells you a lot about what's happening inside your body.
Oh, absolutely. And I think it's also the thing of it's a practice. It's not like you're going to check in with
Mm,
yourself and know how to recognize that feeling right away if it's not something that you've already cultivated. It's
yeah,
something that I continue to practice and I think continue to miss the mark sometimes and
yeah,
continue to be really spot on sometimes. And I think when I was kind of going through this whole transition, I was really intentional about trying to step out of my comfort zone because I could feel that something was off. I was like, something about this is not feeling right. But I
hmm,
couldn't quite put my finger on it yet. So I
yep,
was like, let me try these new hobbies, let me travel, let me spend time with new people who I normally wouldn't seek out. And then as I was doing all of those new things, I was trying to evaluate what do I want to continue and what do I not. And in order to make those decisions, you have to check in with how you feel. So I was
yep,
constantly practicing it. And then I think when I finally built up to that one moment, I had practiced for so long that it just felt so clear.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I really appreciate the practice piece because I think human nature is, I just want to figure it out and then be done and move on. Right. And so we're wired that way of like, check the box. Okay. That
Mm-hmm.
part's done. I can move on to the next. And the reminder of this is a practice. This is a process of, especially if I think as humans, we've always been responsive to doing what we're told, doing what we're expected to do, looking outward for guidance on what we're supposed to be. If you
Mm-hmm.
haven't practiced tapping into hearing and listening to this, the inside voice in your heart, your mind, your spirit, even physically, what your body's
Mm-hmm.
physically telling you, hey, I'm tired, I'm worn out, I don't feel good.
Yeah.
Um, if you've always kind of push that voice away or haven't created space to listen to it, it really is a practice of,
Yeah.
okay, how do I feel right now? Let me just take a minute. Like when you get in your car after work or when you shut down the computer screen after work or,
Mm-hmm.
whatever it is. I mean, is that the best way or thoughts on ways someone could begin to practice this and create that pause and create that space for themselves to start to remove away all the stuff,
Mm-hmm.
and start to create some clarity? What are your suggestions there?
I think really questioning, like you said, how you're feeling, if you're doing certain things, question why you're doing it. All of this kind of coincided when I was just really questioning a lot of where I was at in life and how I wanted to
Yeah,
continue. I think at the peak of it, I was 28 or 29, and all my friends were getting engaged and getting married. And I had just ended a long-term relationship
yeah,
and just questioning all those things. Like, had I kind of followed society, it would have been like, all right, well, I've been with you for however long. I guess we're going to get engaged and get married.
yeah,
But actually, that felt really inauthentic and really icky. And it felt awful as well because it was really like, oh, I'm actually choosing to step away from this. But I think all of this comes back to the questioning of things, questioning and even the small things, start small. Am I eating this breakfast because it feels really good in my body? I feel like I can digest it really well. I feel nourished. I feel energized. Or am I eating this breakfast because the TikTok influencer that I follow said this
yeah,
is number one breakfast, whatever to have?
yeah, yeah,
Am I fasting because I've seen it? Am I taking this job because I've been working towards it for however long? Am I with this person for ever because I really want to be or because it's comfortable?
yeah,
And I think giving yourself the space to feel uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to feel some of these things sometimes. And I think what I've learned is our feelings come up because they're here to tell us things. And sometimes it's hard to listen, but the more you listen, the easier it'll be to
hmm,
be true to yourself. And that being true to yourself is the only thing that matters. Whatever anyone else has to say, you can take it with a grain of salt or just completely throw it out the window, depending on who that person is. But at the end of the day, you're always with yourself. Wherever you go, there you are. So being true to yourself, no matter what.
talk to me about, if I'm listening to this, a thought that might be coming up in my mind right now is, okay, I can do those things, but I'm scared. I don't want to feel uncomfortable. I don't want to make a change. You talked a little bit about just the comfortability of, we get in patterns, we get in habits, we get in
Mhm.
relationships that, as you said, in your heart and you're somewhere in you, you're like this, even if you can't put words to it, you can't put your finger on it, it's not, it's not aligned, it's not the right
Mhm.
fit, it's not, and you intuitively you know that, but the path of least resistance is way easier, and we know what we're going to get, we know what to expect even if we don't like it. So talk to me about how does how do you tap into courage to, okay, we're questioning, we're paying attention to our feelings, Now it's become pretty clear
Mm-hmm.
this isn't the right relationship for me. This isn't the right job. This influencer said this is the number one breakfast, but I don't really like oatmeal after I'm not digging the way I feel after I eat it. So
Yeah.
help take us through real life application of, okay, I'm questioning. Now I have some clarity. Now I have to act on this thing that feels really uncomfortable. It's new, it's different. How do we move through that?
Mm-hmm. I think that's such a real feeling to be having. And I think whenever I feel intense feelings like that, it's a sign to me that I'm heading in the right direction.
Mm,
Uh, that's not to say that it's comfortable or
yeah,
in that moment.
right.
It can be really, really hard and really, really scary at times. Absolutely. Um, I think the thing that I always come back to when I'm struggling to make those decisions is I ask myself, what would I regret? Would I regret staying in this job? And then that always helps give me a lot of clarity. And if the answer is yes, then okay, that doesn't mean you're leaving the next day.
Yeah.
That means you set yourself up so that it is as comfortable as possible to make the change, whatever
Mhm.
that change is for you.
Yeah.
Whether that means saving up a little nest egg, whether that means researching different recipes for your breakfast before
Mhm.
completely throwing out the oatmeal. It doesn't have to be a complete overhaul of your life from one day to the next. Change
Yeah.
takes time. That's just the nature of change,
Mhm.
especially if it's going to be change that is going to be sustainable and that's going to feel um, not like you're jumping into the deep end of the pool and paddling for
Mhm.
dear life. Sometimes that's what happens, and sometimes that's what you need. But I know for me, I always feel better when I feel like I have a little bit of a safety net. And I think what helps a lot with that is having your support system, whether that is friends or family or your community, whatever community that is for you, and like kind of telling people, like, hey, I'm thinking of doing this thing. And not necessarily asking them what they think, because they can think whatever they want to
Right.
think, but
Yeah.
saying, like, I am nervous, I'm scared, and I would love your support. And I think we so often do not ask people for help. And that's something that I've struggled with
Mhm.
all the time. But it really is the biggest gift that you can give someone to be able to be
Yeah.
there to support you. And it makes those transitions easier.
Mhm.
Taking your time and asking for help where you can.
Is there you haven't used this word yet, but it's interesting when you talk about asking for help, and I love your suggestion on just the verbiage and the language of what that might sound like, because someone might struggle with that too. Like you said, hey, that's something that I've really, have been working on, and finding the language to say, I'm scared, I'm nervous, I would really like your support. I think that's just finding the word sometimes is powerful. That
Mhm.
leads me into where my initial question of that sense of vulnerability. And I think that's a big part of what we're talking about with this whole process, right?
Yeah.
It's to stay in a job that maybe is a means to an end, it's not what you want, relationship, like whatever, fill in the gap with whatever is happening for you, right? There is a sense of protection or armor that stays with you. You don't have to necessarily be vulnerable in that space because you already know what you're going to get.
Mhm.
You start shifting over here and removing a layer to reflect and look at feelings, right? That's a whole, a lot of people just in general are like, I don't want to know how I feel,
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
don't, I would rather, and this could be a whole other conversation potentially, but I would rather reach for the thing that makes me feel better than go inward and say, I feel this right now. And then
Mhm.
question that. I also really appreciate your question of, would I regret fill in the blank? and using that as a temperature check to say, yeah, I would. Okay. What does that mean? What is my next small step to take?
Yeah.
If I already know that if I keep eating oatmeal for breakfast and a year from now, I'm going to regret it. Okay. What do I need to do? That's small. That's one step towards making that change that doesn't feel so scary. That brings me full circle into it really is about an opening, which is vulnerability and just the sense of opening to who you are at a deeper level, but also opening yourself to the world, I would imagine. And I don't know if that's even a question, but I'm curious to your thoughts on just
Yeah.
the vulnerability piece and all of that together.
It is, yes, I think you're spot on because it feels so vulnerable and frankly, like really terrifying because it feels like I'm putting my heart on the line to be stepping into this new thing. And I just moved back to my hometown. And as I'm like getting reacquainted with people and meeting new people are like, what do you do? Like, that's a very natural question.
Yeah.
And I can no longer say, I work in higher education. I'm a solutions architect. And like, that sounds so fancy. And everyone's like, ooh, what's that? Now I say, like, I'm a yoga teacher. And even saying that now, like, my heart is kind of like, ooh, like a little, it's funny to say that because I feel like I'm offering this part of myself that I cherish so much because it's a practice that means so much to me and that has had such an impact in my life. But I think to your question, it's vulnerability because you're showing who you are to the
Yeah.
world. You're telling people, I really care about this and I'm willing to dedicate my livelihood and my life to it. Even if it is a non-traditional thing. And I think that's part of like the somatic, that body feeling of like, yeah, this is scary and uncomfortable, but also when I feel that feeling, I'm like, okay, I know it's a little bit uncomfortable right now because it's new. Not uncomfortable because it's bad. It's uncomfortable because I'm treading into new territory. It's a very different way of being and walking through life and walking through professional life. And it's interesting of that. I love the author Brene Brown, and she always says, she's like, the first thing that people look for in each other is vulnerability. And that's the last thing that we're willing to show each other. And I feel
Wow.
that's, isn't that crazy? And it's
So
very
true.
much how I'm showing up now of like, I'm being really vulnerable right away. And some people are on board and like, oh my gosh, that's super cool. Or like, you should connect with whoever. And then some people are like, okay, like, that's different. And then the conversation kind of ends there. And that's
Yeah.
fine too.
Yeah. How do you get, because you've also mentioned this a couple times in our conversation of other people can think whatever they want about anything, right? And, it's not, I know you were just using the example of sharing I'm an EdTech solutions architect
Yeah.
versus I'm a yoga teacher and the feeling that goes along with that. But I'm really curious to hear your thoughts on, because comparison in our society is so significant, and this feeling of what will so and so think, what do they think of me now, am I, all linked back to really self-worth and am I good enough, am I enough?
Yeah.
And if I have these things, if I have this job, this title, these clothes, this car, that equals this. Same thing with that sense of vulnerability of sharing, I'm a yoga teacher, I'm a solutions architect, but my whole purpose and roundabout way of getting there is, how do we let go of they can think whatever they want to think? I'm you said yourself, wherever you go, there you are. You have to be okay with you.
Mm-hmm.
How do we get there without worrying so much about, do I look like this model on Instagram? Do I drive this car that means I'm wealthy? Like, how do we get there?
Oh my gosh.
I
That's a big
know, right? It's
question.
big.
That I think there's so many things. And I think number one, unplugging as much as you can. I limit all my social media. I try not to do more than 30 minutes a day on any
Yep.
platform. And that has helped so much because you're constantly getting influxed with all these different messages that may or may not align with you. And I'm
Mhm.
very aware I am very easily influenced. If I'm on TikTok or Instagram for however long, I know that about myself. I will buy the thing. So guess
Yeah.
what? I'm just not going to look at it. Which is
Yep.
just, it's just true for me. I think as far as other people's opinions go, and it can be hard when those people are family or friends or in your circle, but I always just try to remind myself other people's opinions or thoughts are none of my business. It's just not, it has nothing to do with me and everything to do with them.
Yeah.
And also if I'm feeling some type of way, that's because I feel some type of way. That's about me. And taking the time to take a look at why does that affect me so much? If I want the car, if I want the BMW, why do I feel like I need that? Do I really just
Mm.
need a fast car? Do I want the luxury staple? Like, what is it about that that is so, that holds so much meaning for me?
Yeah.
And digging in. You're not going to
Yep.
do it all at once, but you do
Yeah.
it one thing at a time.
It goes back to what you suggested of the questioning,
Mm-hmm.
starting to just examining and questioning, why do I want that? Is it this? And really, where is that thought, the intention, the desire, like whatever it is, where is that coming from?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then connecting, is that aligned? Is that authentic to me, or is that being driven by something else?
Mm-hmm. And also being aware of who you surround yourself with. Like we're some of our parts and we spend the people who we spend the most amount of time with, of course, we're going to take on some of their beliefs or some of their
Yeah.
habits. Like I've noticed when I lived on the East Coast, like the slang that I developed living on the East Coast and then continue in my day-to-day life, like I'll drop different words and people are like, what are you doing? But it's because I was around people in that area and I picked up those habits. And I think we don't always realize how impactful that can be, whether it's the way people see the world, the way they see their bodies, the way they see income or jobs or whatever it might be. Like you're going to be influenced by who you're around. So being really thoughtful about it. And
Yeah.
again, that doesn't mean drop all your friends or completely excommunicate your family if you're not aligned
Right.
with them, but just starting to be more thoughtful about it and
Mhm.
maybe going outside of your comfort zone to meet those people who really do align with who you want to be, who you're moving
Mhm.
towards being.
Mhm. Transitioning a little bit, you shared with us that you really enjoy teaching Yin Yoga, and you explained to us a little bit about what Yin Yoga is and um, what would be a piece of Yin Yoga that you could offer up in this conversation to someone who is maybe sitting at a desk all day long and needs to create space or find space or peace, or maybe they have a long commute, maybe they go from one thing to the next and the idea of space is like, oh yeah, that's a luxury, I would love to have that.
Mhm.
What is something that you could offer in this conversation that people could try?
Right away, my mind is like calculating everything that I could say. Um, and as I'm saying that, I'm like, ooh, how am I sitting in my chair? Ah,
Yeah.
think the number one thing that I think you could do if you're sitting at a desk, a lot of the times is we hold so much tension in our neck and in our shoulders. And I think a lot of people are familiar with the idea of doing neck rolls.
Hmm.
The yin way to do that would be when you're rolling your neck, anywhere that it feels, I describe it as like a sticky spot, like where there is
Hmm.
tension, pausing there. You pause
Okay.
there wherever you feel it and like breathe into it and stay there. Set a timer on your phone and stay there for like 2 or 3 minutes if you can,
Okay.
because that's what allows all of that soft fascia and connective tissue to really relax and release and creates that space, and just can make all the difference. And then doing that with your hands. A lot of people start to suffer from like carpal tunnel or just like stiffness.
Ah,
And
yep.
then just like going like this,
We're
but
just
hold on.
holding just like this.
Instead of just like 1, 2, we're done. That's great. Do that if that's all the time you have.
Mm-hmm.
If you have a few extra minutes, hold it. Set the timer again.
Yep.
Do it for 2 or 3 minutes, and you'll notice all of this will kind of just open up. And it can feel a little bit, it shouldn't feel painful. If it feels painful, ease up on it.
Mm-hmm.
Feel sensation. And then when you feel that sensation, still stick with it. And you'll start to see a little bit of openness come.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so similar to the neck, like, would you recommend just holding it here and allowing the weight of the body to create that openness? Do you like the hand to do any of this, or what's your
Yeah.
take on that?
I think it depends on your body. Everyone's anatomy is really different. Everybody's structure and how they're going to hold that tension is different. So starting, I would say without the hand. And if this
Mhm.
feels really easy, you don't feel anything, add your hand and add that traction.
Mhm.
And then doing it in all different spaces. So doing the full neck roll, allowing your head to hang heavy like that. I do that right now and I can feel my whole
Oh
spine
yeah.
opening
Yeah.
up. It's funny, I've done yin for I think 2 years pretty regularly now, and I've grown. I grew like an inch and a half.
You've stretched
I
an
physically
inch and a
grew.
half.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. I thought
I
it was
I
crazy, but
get it, because well, and I think you explained this a little bit earlier, the connective tissue starts to how would you describe it? Just like
it
that tension
compresses.
holds it, compresses.
It compresses, and it's the thing of like if you're not moving it and allowing the space to happen, the space will condense. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you're doing those stretches and when you're holding them for long periods of time, the space becomes bigger and bigger and bigger.
It
So, and I think that
opens.
happened in my spine.
Yes. So if we
Yeah.
all want to grow an inch and a half,
Yeah,
Yin yoga is the answer. Yeah.
exactly. Always.
um, you've shared so much wisdom with us, Laura. I feel like we went on a tour of transition from the corporate world to emotions and just very practical ways to examine, reflect. And I love that you brought us into very bite-sized pieces. So it's not like, oh, just make the change or do something different. It really, taking us back almost 30 minutes now, it's a practice, and that practice starts with paying attention to how you feel
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
asking those questions. Would I regret this if I fill in the blank? And then
Mm-hmm.
choosing to, whatever the answer is to that question for whatever you're examining or looking at, making one small step forward to begin that shift or that transition, and not feeling like you're going to not fix, but you're not going to change things overnight. It's
Yeah.
not going to be a check the box. Okay, that's done. I'm all set. I've
Mm-hmm.
evolved. I'm done. I'm grown.
Yeah.
um, but just being open to that being a practice. So I was going to say, you've shared so much wisdom with us already, but do you have any words of wisdom that you would offer that you haven't shared yet?
I think the biggest thing for me that I continue to learn is to give yourself perspective. And the way that I always do that is I ask myself when I'm on my deathbed, what is the story of my life that I want to
Mm,
tell? Do I want to say I had an amazing 40-year long career in finance? That could be true for some people. Some
yeah,
people might love that.
yeah,
For other people, that might not be the case.
yep,
But just really asking that all the time and getting into the habit of it, of questioning everything and asking, what is the story that I want to tell?
mm-hmm.
And I think doing that in a way that is manageable, that's within your means, and where you're not going to feel like you're floundering, but like you're taking steps in writing the story of your life that you'll be proud to tell.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
And I think writing that story of your life, you're the one with the pen, right? Which means you're in the driver's seat. You're the one
Mhm.
making the calls on where this story goes.
Yeah.
And the story can't write itself authentically without you holding the pen. I mean, you are the one that knows where the next chapter and the next chapter, and ultimately it
Mhm.
ends. So I love that. I love
Yeah.
that. Think about what you want your story of your life to be.
Yeah. And knowing that it can change, that there's certainly
Mm.
chapters of my life where I'm like, I wish I could erase that or like cross that out and
Yeah.
rewrite it. And
Yeah.
that's just a part of life. And then there's other
Mhm.
parts where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I did that. How can I do more of that?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing with us today. I am feeling, you say pay attention to how you're feeling. I'll be honest, before I got on this call, I was in meeting after meeting after meeting, and I was like, man. And then after this conversation, Laura, you have filled up my cup, and I feel energized and ready to finish the rest of the day. So thank you for just resetting us and helping
Yeah.
us to think about what we want the story of our life to be, and practical ways to help us figure that out
Mm.
along our journey,
Yeah.
whether that's in the corporate space or in your life outside of your work. And I think we forget that too, right? Your work is only one element of
Mm-hmm.
your life.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So,
Absolutely. It's been a pleasure. This certainly filled my cup.
well, we would love to have you back. And again, thank you all for listening. We do have our Zen Leader Masterclass live and ready for you, climbing the corporate ladder and staying calm in the chaos, for $88. There's all kinds of stuff in there, guided meditations, a workbook, all kinds of stuff that will help you to tap into your confidence, discover your voice, and stay calm in the chaos along the way. So we hope you will continue to follow us and be part of our journey and share your journey along the way. See you all soon.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening. If you're ready to begin your personal Zen Leader journey, head over to zenleader.org and sign up for our Zen Leader Masterclass course, Climbing the Ladder and Staying Calm in the Chaos. Zen Leader also offers customizable group coaching programs and workshops to fit organizations and industries of any size. Whether you're looking to tap into your confidence, discover your voice, or find tranquility amidst the chaos, Zen Leader is here to support you every step of the way.